It started with a box of chocolates. Not just any chocolates, the kind that comes in sleek, expensive packaging, the kind you don't expect from someone who spent years pretending to like you. My mother-in-law, Helen, sent them to me on my birthday, hand-delivered. No note, no card. Just that box wrapped like a gift as if to say, "See, I'm not so bad." But something felt off. You know that feeling in your gut when something looks too perfect? I didn't touch them. I thanked her politely, smiled through my teeth, and set them aside. I figured I'd deal with it later. But my husband, Ryan's, got a sweet tooth and a trusting heart. He ate the whole thing over 2 days. The morning after, he collapsed in our kitchen. At first, I thought it was the flu, food poisoning maybe. But when the doctor said toxins and Helen's reaction to the news was, let's say, strangely specific, everything changed. That was the moment I stopped questioning my instincts and started questioning everyone around me. What if the chocolates were meant for me? What if this wasn't a freak incident, but a plan? And what if the people smiling at me across the dinner table had been plotting my death all along? This is the story of how a birthday gift unraveled years of secrets, jealousy, and a family's darkest intentions. How something so small revealed a hidden war I never agreed to fight. And how in the end, love nearly cost me my life. It had been a weird week even before the chocolates showed up. I was knee-deep in deadlines, bouncing between freelance gigs, and trying to ignore the passive-aggressive group texts from Ryan's family about his upcoming birthday dinner. His mom, Helen, loved to act like she was just trying to include me, but every message was a thinly veiled jab. Why hadn't I RSVP'd yet? Was I bringing my quirky little dietary restrictions again? So when that gift box arrived, wrapped to perfection and delivered to our doorstep, I honestly didn't know what to make of it. Helen had never given me anything remotely that expensive before. Usually I got re-gifted scarves or something oddly impersonal, like a baking soda facial scrub kit. This time it was Belgian, artisanal, handcrafted, the kind of chocolate you Google just to make sure it isn't fake. No note, no card, just my name on a sticky label. I didn't open them right away. Something about the gesture felt calculated, like she knew it would throw me off balance. I set the box aside on the counter and figured I'd deal with it later, maybe offer one to Ryan and pretend I wasn't suspicious. But Ryan beat me to it. He walked into the kitchen, spotted the box like a hawk, and popped the lid before I could say anything. "Ooh, fancy," he grinned. "Who sent these?" I told him. He raised an eyebrow. "Your mom? Really?" He didn't hesitate. Picked out the round one with gold dust on top and popped it into his mouth. "Okay, wow, these are amazing," he said, already reaching for another. I wanted to stop him, not because I thought they were poisoned, not yet anyway, but because something didn't sit right with me. It felt like walking into a room where someone had just been arguing. The air is still buzzing, but nobody is saying anything. You know what I mean? By the end of that day, he'd eaten at least half the box. I didn't touch a single piece. That night, while we were getting ready for bed, I asked Ryan again what he thought about the gift. He shrugged. I mean, maybe she's trying to make peace? That word, peace, stuck with me. Because it implied there was a war and I'd been the only one fighting it out loud. Ryan always wanted to believe the best in people, especially his family. I envied that about him, even if it sometimes made him blind. I stayed up late that night scrolling through emails, wondering if I'd missed a warning sign. Maybe this was Helen's way of buying silence, or maybe it was just guilt. But why now? Why on my birthday? The next morning, the box was empty. Ryan said he finished them after I fell asleep. "Can't let luxury go to waste," he joked, rubbing his stomach. By noon, he was curled up on the bathroom floor. Violent vomiting, chills, he could barely stand. I tried not to panic, but after an hour, he was pale and disoriented. We rushed to urgent care where they immediately sent us to the hospital. Something about his vitals set off alarms. While they hooked him up to fluids and monitors, I stepped into the hallway to call Helen. I figured if she'd sent the chocolates, she should know what's happening. She picked up on the second ring. I told her Ryan was in the ER. that he'd been sick all morning after eating the chocolates she sent. There was a pause. Then she said, "Wait, Ryan ate them? All of them? How is he? Not what's going on, just, he ate them." The hair on the back of my neck stood up. I didn't say anything, neither did she. Then she quickly added, "I mean, poor guy. Let me know what the doctors say." She hung up a little too fast. That was the first time I really thought, that something was wrong. Really wrong. The hospital was a blur of fluorescent lights and worried glances. Nurses moved fast. Doctors asked questions I couldn't answer, and Ryan lay there shaking, hooked up to monitors and IV bags. His blood pressure was low. His heart rate is erratic. They kept using the word toxins. Not food poisoning. Not a stomach virus. Toxins. I kept replaying the past 48 hours in my head. Everything he ate, everything we did. It all came back to those chocolates. When the toxicology report came back, the attending physician pulled me aside. His voice was calm, clinical. "There's something in his system that shouldn't be there, a compound we usually see in chemical poisoning cases. It's not something found in food by accident." That sentence hit me like a punch. Poison. This wasn't an allergy or a spoiled snack. Someone had deliberately put something in those chocolates. I didn't say anything, just nodded. But inside, my mind was racing. And then Helen called me. She never just called me out of the blue. Normally, everything went through Ryan, but this time she rang my phone directly. I stepped outside the hospital doors to take it, pacing along the sidewalk. Her voice was tight. "How's Ryan?" I told her he was stable, still in observation. She exhaled, not with relief, but something else, like disappointment. Then she asked, "Did they say what caused it?" I told her the doctors were still running tests. She hesitated and then said, "It might have been, stress. That job of his. He never takes care of himself." That's when I realized she was laying groundwork, deflection, a rehearsed explanation. My gut twisted. I told her the doctors mentioned toxins, that his reaction was severe. And then she said something that made my skin crawl. "Are you sure it wasn't one of your herbal things? Those teas you drink?" I stared out into the street, dumbfounded. She was trying to pin it on me, like I'd somehow poisoned my own husband. I didn't respond. I just told her we'd let her know if anything changed and hung up. A few hours later, Emily showed up at the hospital. She brought coffee, made a dramatic show of concern, and sat beside me like we were best friends. "He's going to be okay," she whispered, hand on my shoulder. "You'll see." I wanted to believe her, but her timing felt too perfect. Too polished. That night, I went home alone. I didn't sleep. I kept pacing, thinking, wondering, what if this wasn't the first time something like this had happened? And then something clicked. 3 months earlier, I had a weird spell. Nausea, headaches, fatigue. I thought it was burnout. But now I wondered, what if it wasn't me? What if someone was testing something out? The idea was too horrifying to say out loud. I went back to the kitchen, picked up the empty chocolate box still sitting by the sink, and stared at it. That thing, that gift, had nearly killed my husband. Or maybe it hadn't. Maybe it had done exactly what it was supposed to do, and he just wasn't the target. I sat down with my laptop and started digging through emails, texts, even our group family chat, looking for clues, patterns, and I started noticing things that never made sense before. Helen's subtle comments about our life insurance, Emily's awkward stares when I got sick that one weekend, the way they always questioned my career, my independence. For years, I'd brushed it off as jealousy or just old-school resentment, but now it felt like something else, something coordinated. And I remembered one more thing, a small moment I hadn't thought twice about. The day before my birthday, Emily had asked Ryan in the group chat if we'd be celebrating with anything sweet. I thought it was a joke, but maybe it was her way of checking that he'd be home, that I'd be home. Suddenly, I wasn't just suspicious. I was scared. The next day at the hospital, things didn't improve much. Ryan was still weak, barely, able to keep water down. The doctors kept running tests, but the results weren't immediate, and the air in the room was thick with tension. I sat by his bed, watching the monitor beep in slow, uneven rhythm, wondering how close I had come to losing him. That's when Emily texted me. She asked if she could stop by to check on him again, said she'd bring snacks or anything I needed. I told her to hold off. I was polite but firm. I needed space, and more than anything, I needed to think. It had started to sink in that something was very, very wrong, and not just with Ryan's health. That night, a nurse came into the room to check his vitals, and while she worked, she asked, "Did he have anything out of the ordinary to eat yesterday?" I hesitated. "Chocolates," I said. "A gift. From his mom." The nurse's eyes paused on her chart. "Do you still have the box?" she asked. I froze. "No," I said quietly. "It's gone." Because it was. I had left it on the counter, but by the time I came back from the hospital the first night, it was nowhere to be found. I checked the trash, the fridge, the cabinets. Nothing. It had disappeared. I called Emily, straight to voicemail. Then I tried Helen. She picked up chipper like nothing had happened. I asked directly, had either of them been at our place? "Oh no," she said. "Of course not. We wouldn't go snooping around." But I hadn't even mentioned that the chocolate box was missing. She brought it up first. It was too specific, too rehearsed. My stomach dropped. She was covering her tracks, or trying to. And then I remembered something strange from the night before. The front door had been locked, but I noticed the rug just inside was crooked, like someone had opened the door quickly and forgotten to straighten it afterward. At the time, I brushed it off. But now, in hindsight, it screamed of someone entering when we weren't there, someone who had a key. And Helen had a spare from when she used to water the plants when we traveled. The next morning, Detective Martinez showed up at the hospital. A poison case had triggered mandatory reporting, and he was following up. He asked to speak to me alone, and I agreed. I laid it all out. The chocolates, Helen's strange reaction, the way Emily had shown up out of nowhere, and how the box had disappeared overnight. He listened carefully, not interrupting. Then he asked, "Do you have any reason to believe someone wanted to harm your husband?" That was the moment I said it out loud. "I don't think he was the target." Martinez raised an eyebrow. "You think it was meant for you?" I nodded. "I never ate a single piece." He asked if I felt unsafe. I told him the truth. I didn't know what to feel. But I wasn't going to sit in silence anymore. He asked for any messages, calls, anything strange. I showed him the group chat, the messages from Emily, the sweet joke. He read them all and took notes. Before leaving, he said something that stuck with me. "If this was intentional, they'll slip up. People who do this kind of thing, they always think they're smarter than they are." And then he paused. "Do you trust them in your home?" I didn't answer right away. As I watched him walk out of the hospital room, I felt something I hadn't in days. A little bit of control. I didn't know how deep this went yet, but I knew it was no longer just suspicion. It was starting to feel like a plan unraveling in real time, and I wasn't going to be the last to know anymore. Detective Martinez didn't waste time. The day after our conversation, he called and asked if he could stop by the apartment, just to take a look around, he said. Nothing formal yet. I said yes. I wanted answers as much as he did. Maybe more. He arrived in plain clothes, not a badge in sight, and moved through the space with quiet precision. He didn't treat it like a crime scene. Not yet. But he paid attention to everything. Where the chocolate box had been, the trash can, the kitchen counters. He asked for any packaging I might have saved. I hadn't kept anything. That felt like a mistake now. He took some swabs from the counter and a few items from the trash, then left with a small evidence bag and a serious look on his face. Within 2 days, things started to accelerate. Martinez called me back and asked for a list of anyone who had access to our apartment. I mentioned Helen and Emily. Both had keys. One from before we moved in, the other because Ryan had insisted they could help if anything happened. That trust now felt naive. Or maybe just dangerous. I told him everything I could remember. The missing chocolate box. The crooked rug. The timing of the calls. Even the way Helen had slipped on the phone and mentioned the box before I brought it up. That evening he reached out again, this time with a different tone. "We need to speak with your in-laws." He didn't share details, but his voice told me enough. Something had shifted. They had found something. The next morning, Helen and Emily were brought in for a preliminary interview. No arrests, just conversations, according to the detective. But Helen refused to go without a lawyer, and Emily, well, she showed up all smiles, like she didn't understand what was happening. Martinez later told me that Emily was nervous, fidgety. Her story about the night of Ryan's collapse didn't match Helen's timeline. Small details didn't line up, and when asked if either of them had visited our apartment after we left for the hospital, both said no, firmly, clearly. But then Martinez asked a question he said always gets results. He asked Emily what brand the chocolates were. She hesitated, said she didn't remember. Martinez pushed. "But you were there when your mother bought them, weren't you?" That's when she froze. That slip unraveled everything. According to Martinez, she stammered. Said something like, "Well, I mean, I saw them later, not when she got them." A contradiction, a small one, but enough. It confirmed she had seen the chocolates before they arrived at my door, maybe even helped pick them out. Now there was a new angle. Premeditation. He told me later that Helen had been cold, almost smug. She barely blinked during the questioning, didn't raise her voice or argue. Just denied. But when asked why she had chosen that specific chocolate shop, one known for custom orders, she slipped. She said, "Well, Clara has always liked lavender truffles." But I hadn't said anything about the flavor. Neither had Ryan. She had just revealed she knew exactly what was inside. When Martinez asked if she'd kept a receipt, she said she paid in cash. Of course she did. Later that night, I got a call from Natalie, my closest friend and a criminal attorney. I hadn't wanted to involve her, but now I needed someone in my corner. I told her everything. She listened and didn't interrupt. And when I finished, she asked a single question. "Do you want this to go away quietly, or do you want the truth?" I didn't hesitate. I want the truth. Because deep down, I already knew. This wasn't just about poisoning. It was about something that had been building for years. The tension, the envy, the way they looked at me like I didn't belong. This was the tip of something rotten, and I was ready to pull it all up. A week after Ryan was discharged, he still wasn't the same. He moved slower, spoke less, and slept in short bursts. The toxins had done damage, though the doctors said he was lucky. They kept using that word. Lucky. I didn't feel it. Ryan's trust in his family hadn't completely cracked yet. He believed in coincidence, in stress, in weird accidents. He said maybe we were reading too much into things, but I couldn't let it go. Especially not after what Detective Martinez had uncovered. One afternoon, I stopped by Helen's house. It wasn't planned. I told Ryan I was going to the store, but I drove across town instead, heart pounding, palms sweating. I parked 2 houses down and walked the rest of the way. I knew the spare key was still under the chipped flower pot on the porch, but I didn't need it. As I stepped onto the porch, I heard voices inside, Helen and Emily, loud enough that I froze. "I told you not to put all of it in one batch," Helen snapped. "It was supposed to be subtle, controlled." "I didn't know he'd eat the whole thing," Emily hissed back. "How was I supposed to stop him? He's like a vacuum." There was silence. Then Helen again. "Well, it's done. He wasn't the one we were aiming for, but maybe this works in our favor. She's rattled." My stomach dropped. I stepped back, hand trembling over my phone, heart racing. I couldn't believe what I was hearing. "She won't go to the police." Helen continued. She's too careful. She'll just drift away. That's what we wanted anyway. Emily sounded less sure. What if she doesn't? What if she digs? She's a freelancer, Helen scoffed. She has no power, no backing. Ryan will come around. He always does. I was frozen on that porch, barely breathing. They weren't just trying to hurt me. They had planned this. They had expected me to disappear, either from fear or something worse. I backed away slowly, got in the car, and drove straight to Natalie's office. When I told her what I heard, she didn't even blink. "We're done playing nice," she said. "We record, we document, and we build a case." I filed a formal complaint that day, gave Martinez a full statement. The overheard conversation was inadmissible without a recording, but it confirmed everything we suspected. We needed physical proof. That night, Ryan and I sat down for the first time in silence. I told him everything: the visit, the voices, the plan. I expected denial, anger. But instead, he just stared at the floor and whispered, "I think I've known." Somewhere deep down. I didn't cry, I didn't yell. I just reached for his hand and said, "Then let's find the truth." Together. The next day, we started looking through our own history. Messages, voicemails, anything that might seem ordinary, but, in hindsight, had a different meaning. And once we started looking, we couldn't stop. There was a message from Emily, sent months ago, about knowing people who had access to prescription substances. We had brushed it off as a dumb joke at the time. Now, it reads like a red flag. There was also a dinner invite we had declined because I was sick, something Emily had been particularly cold about afterward. She had made a comment to Ryan about how I was always conveniently unwell. We thought it was just a family drama. But what if it was something she had planned, and I'd thrown off the timing? I even remembered Helen's odd interest in our schedule. She always asked when we were home, who'd be around, if we had plans. Back then, it felt like nosy mother-in-law behavior. Now it felt like surveillance. The more we looked, the more everything started to fit. Too well. Like pieces that had been shattered around us for years, and now someone had turned on the light. It was terrifying. But it was also fuel. We were no longer alone in suspicion. Now, we were preparing for a confrontation. It all came to a head faster than I expected. One evening, just after dinner, Martinez called. He didn't ask questions, this time. He told me what they'd found. A search of Emily's car, done after a routine traffic stop, revealed 2 chocolate boxes identical to the one she and Helen had sent to me. Still sealed. Same brand, same ribbons, same handwritten style, label on top. One was addressed to someone named Monica. The other had no label at all. Inside the sealed boxes were truffles, identical in shape and decoration. But when tested, both boxes came back positive for the same toxic compound that had made Ryan collapse. Arsenic mixed with a rarely used herbal derivative, subtle, delayed, and dangerous in high doses. They had prepared more. The officers didn't wait. They picked up Emily first. She was at work. She didn't resist, but cried when they cuffed her. Claimed she didn't know anything. Blamed Helen immediately. Helen was arrested at home in a floral robe holding a glass of wine. She didn't say a word. Just stared at the officers like she'd been expecting them. She didn't argue, didn't flinch. She set the wine glass down and asked if she could change her shoes. That part stuck with me. Both were charged with attempted murder. The prosecution built the case quickly. Between the chocolates in Emily's car, the inconsistencies in their interviews, and the toxicology report from Ryan's hospitalization, it was a clean arc, even without a recorded confession. Natalie helped me navigate every step. I wasn't part of the case directly, not at first. But when I gave a sworn affidavit about what I overheard and the months of mistreatment I'd endured, it became clear this wasn't just a failed poisoning. It was a pattern. The prosecution argued motive: jealousy, control, and money. Helen had taken out a life insurance policy on Ryan through a private provider just 6 months prior. One where the payout would have gone directly to her, not to me. The only way that would happen was if Ryan died before updating his beneficiary. The investigators pulled financial records. There were quiet, recurring transactions from Helen to an unregistered P.O. box, cash withdrawals with no clear purpose. The assumption? She'd been building a plan for a while. Whether Emily knew the full scope, we couldn't say, but her involvement was clear enough. Court proceedings began 2 months later. The courtroom was cold, clinical, packed with lawyers and tension. Ryan testified. So did I. So did the nurse who'd asked about the chocolates and the tech who processed the toxicology. All of them connected dots that led to one conclusion. The jury didn't take long. Helen was sentenced to 5 years in prison. 5 years for trying to end a life, not mine, as she'd intended, but her own son's. Emily, who had shown signs of being manipulated, received a suspended 3-year sentence and court-mandated therapy. She wasn't off the hook. But she wasn't behind bars either. It didn't feel like justice exactly. I don't know what would have happened. But it felt like a door finally closing. After the sentencing, Helen looked at me once. Just once. No anger, no apology. Just a cold, calculating stare like she was already writing her next move in her head. But it didn't matter anymore. She wouldn't be able to play that role again. As we walked out of the courthouse, the sky was overcast, but the air felt lighter. For the first time in years, there wasn't a shadow following me out of a family gathering or a message laced with hidden barbs. The chapter had ended, and I wasn't looking back. With the trial over and the sentences handed down, you'd think we would have moved on. That we'd close the door, pack our things, and start over. But the truth is, the aftermath stuck to everything. Like smoke in your clothes after a fire. Natalie was the one who pushed us to go further. She didn't believe this had been a one-time act of desperation. She believed it was part of something that had started much earlier. You don't go from cold stares to arsenic overnight, she said. She was right. Together, we started digging into old files, emails, medical records, anything that might explain the quiet decline I'd felt over the past couple of years. Times I'd gotten sick without cause, days I couldn't get out of bed, weeks of migraines that no doctor could explain. It had all seemed random, stress-related. But now, with everything that happened, it demanded a second look. And there it was. A year earlier, I'd gone to urgent care after fainting in our apartment. My blood pressure had dropped dramatically. I remember being told it could have been dehydration, maybe diet-related. But the nurse had noted in my file a strange metallic taste I mentioned. At the time, I brushed it off. Now it reads, like foreshadowing. Then came the insurance documents. Ryan, trying to take control of his life again, started going through his accounts. That's when he found it. A life insurance policy taken out years before we got married. The beneficiary had been Helen, and though he'd meant to update it after our wedding, the paperwork had never gone through. The form had been in our home. He remembered leaving it on the dining table, half-filled. But when he looked at the scanned version submitted online, it was marked as complete, with his signature. Only it wasn't his handwriting. Natalie. Confirmed it. Forged. Subtle, but off. Enough that if no one questioned it, it would have stood in court. Helen had planned for a payout, probably thinking no one would dig that deep. There were even more clues in emails and texts, small things that had once felt like normal family chatter. Helen asked oddly detailed questions about our routines. Emily suggested supplements during flu season, dropping off tea for your stress that, looking back, I never actually drank. And then a strange discovery at Helen's house. After the trial, the house had been locked up, but Ryan was still the legal executor of her estate while she was incarcerated. We went back to collect some of his childhood items. In the back of the guest room closet was a wooden box filled with loose papers, newspaper clippings, medical articles, even web printouts about natural methods of subtle poisoning. There was even a list written in pencil. Clara, almond oil, tea blends, lavender, fatigue. Like she'd been keeping notes. It was chilling. Even worse, tucked into the back of the box was a journal entry. Something written by Helen in tight, slanted cursive. It wasn't quite a confession, but it was close. A page describing how she felt disrespected and replaced after Ryan married me. How she believed I was manipulating him away from his true family. It ended with a line I'll never forget. Sometimes, to protect your own, you have to remove the infection. She meant me. Everything pointed to this being a long game, years in the making, subtle, slow. The poisoning wasn't just a moment of madness, it had been a strategy. And somewhere along the line, Emily had either bought in or decided it was easier to follow along than stop it. Knowing all of this didn't make me feel better. It made me feel haunted, but it also gave me clarity. What happened to Ryan wasn't a tragic accident. It was a missed target. And my gut? It hadn't been overreacting all those years. It had been warning me. I just didn't know how to listen. Now I did. Ryan and I both knew we had one more thing to do. The arrests had happened. The trial had played out. The sentences were in. But we still hadn't faced the full truth. Not together, not completely. And the more we learned, the more we realized there were answers still waiting for us inside Helen's house. Not in court records, not in police files, but in the walls, drawers, and hidden corners of the place where it all began. It felt strange unlocking her door with a key she'd once insisted we never lose. The house smelled the same, like lemon polish and old carpet, too clean, too staged. We walked in quietly, like guests in our own past. Ryan led the way. He hadn't said much all morning, but I could tell this was eating at him. No one wants to believe their own mother could be capable of something so dark. But now that the veil was gone, we couldn't unsee it. We started studying. Files were neatly arranged, books on psychology and family systems perfectly aligned. But it wasn't until I opened the bottom drawer of her locked filing cabinet that we found what we didn't expect: a manila folder labeled contingencies. Inside were insurance forms, copies of emails, and a list of passwords. One of those passwords led us into a private email account, not her normal one. This one was used almost exclusively to research substances, insurance claims, and for online orders placed under aliases. We printed everything. In her bedroom, tucked inside a cedar chest beneath folded quilts, we found a shoebox. Inside were vials. Small, dark brown bottles with faded labels. Some were herbal, some weren't. One still had a dropper inside it. I remember my hand shaking as I pulled it out. It looked identical to the kind Ryan had used once when he was sick with the flu. Drops Helen had told him were natural immunity boosters. They hadn't worked. We kept looking. In the attic, in a dusty corner behind old Christmas decorations, Ryan pulled down a bin labeled memorabilia. Inside, under layers of old photos, was another journal. Not the angry, obsessed voice from the last one, but a more careful, clinical tone. As if Helen had started cataloging her efforts. Dosages, dates. C responded poorly to oil blend, one entry said. Next attempt with truffles. Adjust ratio. E will deliver. We stared at each other. It was no longer a theory. This was documented. Ryan sat on the floor of that attic and didn't speak for 5 minutes. I didn't push him. I just sat beside him, watching him process the weight of betrayal. The woman who had raised him, who had seemed so put together, so in control, had been quietly experimenting. On me. On us. Eventually, he said, I kept thinking I missed the signs, but they weren't signs, they were strategies. We took everything, journals, bottles, documents, and gave them to Martinez. It was late in the investigation, but it sealed the narrative. The motive, the planning, the intent. This wasn't just a case of hatred or fear. It was an obsession. Helen had built her reality around control, and when she lost it, she lashed out the only way she knew how. Quietly, slowly, and with deadly intent. As we were leaving, Ryan paused by the living room. There, on a side table, was a framed photo of the entire family, Thanksgiving years ago. Helen had her arms around both of us. We looked happy. He stared at it for a moment, then turned it face down. That night, we went home and sat in silence. The house was quiet. The tension that had hovered for years had lifted. But what replaced? It wasn't peace. Not yet. It was something more honest, the raw truth. And it was only in that honesty that we finally started to heal. After everything we'd been through, we needed distance. Not just from the city or Helen's house or the courtroom, but from the version of life we'd been trying to hold together for far too long. The one where appearances mattered more than instincts. Where we smiled at people who quietly resented us. Where we kept trying to belong to a family that never wanted us whole. So we left San Francisco, packed our things into a rental truck and drove across the country, chasing stillness. We found it in Vermont, a quiet town where people wave at you from their porch and no one cares what your last name is. The house we moved into had creaky floors and chipped paint, but it was ours, really ours. I remember the first morning waking up there, no traffic outside, no bitter group texts. Just sunlight through the window and Ryan in the kitchen, humming to himself. It felt like breathing again after holding it in for years. We didn't talk about Helen much, not because we were trying to forget, we never could, but because giving her space in our new life felt like dragging poison into clean air. We acknowledged what happened, we processed it, but we didn't let it define the rest of our story. Therapy helped. Separately, together. It wasn't about healing fast, but healing honestly. We talked about trust, fear, the damage slow manipulation can cause. Ryan opened up in ways I'd never seen before. And for the first time, I felt like we weren't just surviving something. We were rebuilding something stronger. And then, in the middle of all that rebuilding, came news we hadn't expected. I was pregnant. The moment I saw the test, I sat on the edge of our tub and just laughed. Not from joy at first, but from disbelief. After everything? After all that chaos and pain and fear, here was a new beginning. A clean one. I told Ryan, that night, expecting shock. Instead, he smiled in a way I hadn't seen since long before the chocolates, long before the hospital, long before Helen's shadow ever touched our home. We're going to do it right, he said. This time, we build it all on truth. And we are. We talk about the baby every night. Names, colors, ridiculous nursery themes. We plant flowers in the yard. We cook together. We argue. We make up. We live, fully. Not perfectly, but honestly. Sometimes I still check the locks twice. Sometimes I wake up from dreams where Helen's voice is in the room. But those moments are fewer now. Softer. I know they'll fade. What won't fade is what we've learned. That your instincts are there for a reason. That love isn't measured by who says it loudest, but who protects it when no one else is looking. That family doesn't mean safety by default. It has to be earned. Ryan and I started writing letters to our future child. Little notes tucked into a box. We write about our fears, our hopes, and the lessons we had to learn the hard way. One day, when they're old enough, they'll read those letters and know the truth. Not the sanitized version, but the full, messy, painful story that shaped their parents. Because that's what love is now. It's not about forgetting the past. It's about refusing to repeat it. We built something new out here, something safe, simple, and true. And we did it not just to escape the past, but to honor what we survived. To make sure our child grows up knowing love that isn't conditional, that isn't manipulated, that isn't performative, but real. And that's the life worth fighting for. The story, in truth, finishes not with a dramatic twist or a final courtroom scene, but in the quiet moments that come after. The kind where healing doesn't announce itself, it just happens gradually. Like laughter coming easier, like sleeping through the night without waking in fear. Months passed in Vermont. The seasons changed. Our baby was born, a girl, with Ryan's eyes and my stubbornness. We named her June, after the month we finally felt free. There's a photo on our wall now. It's not staged. No matching outfits. Or forced smiles. Just the three of us in the backyard, sun in our faces, June on Ryan's shoulders, squealing. That photo says everything the past couldn't. That we made it out. That we built something real. That we're no longer afraid. And sometimes, that's how stories like this really end. Not with revenge, but with peace. With choosing a different future. With surviving something unthinkable. And turning it into something unforgettable. Not because of the pain, but because of what came after it. Because healing isn't flashy, it's quiet, it's earned. And sometimes, the strongest thing you can do isn't to fight back, but to walk away and live better. That's what we did, and that's what we'll keep doing. One ordinary, beautiful day at a time.